family resided in Litchfield when Louis left it in the fall of 1841 to begin his freshman year at Washington College in Hartford, long since renamed as Trinity. Louis's early years proved a bit simpler to reconstruct than his later ones, but I get ahead of myself. While Philadelphia, New York, and New England played their distinctive regional variants of baseball, in Connecticut, an odd game called wicket, or wicket ball, reigned. It resembled what Britons thought of as country cricket, a game that by the 1750s had been utterly supplanted in England by the standardized modern game and the Marylebone cricket laws of 1744, with which you're all familiar. Wicket had gone wherever Connecticut emigrants settled, to the Western Reserve of Ohio and Michigan. Little Connecticut had vast territories, and I'm bringing calls to Newcastle. You guys already know of the great territory controlled by Connecticut until the 1830s. And wicket had gone with congregational missionaries from Connecticut as far as Hawaii. So wicket was played in Hawaii before baseball was, and before Cartwright supposedly brought the game on his way west, which is another fib. Wicket was played along a 75-foot alley of hard ground, rolled, skinned of grass, with the wicket bowler having to skip the ball along the ground, touching down at least once in his own 37.5-foot portion. It bears mentioning that this figure represented baseball's 1857 pitching distance of 45 feet, reduced by 1/6 precisely, which was its probable original distance in 1845 when Cartwright and the boys were playing. And this distance was the one long after recommended for inexperienced players. If you look at that, that is the wicket, 5 feet wide, barely 6 inches off the ground. Unlike the cricket wicket, which is tall and has bails and 3 posts. They're not called posts, they're called something else. Little recalled or understood today, wicket was the diversion of choice for young nutmeggers until nearly 1860. One of wicket's hotspots was Hartford, on the campus of Washington College, where it may well have been played by Louis Fenn Wadsworth, class of 1844. Let alone a possible father of baseball, until the winter of 1907, when the Mills Commission, previously mentioned, that's also called the Spalding Commission, near the end of its 3-year mandate. It had been ordered to spend 3 years researching the origins of baseball, soliciting interviews, beginning in 1905, ending in 1907, so that they could issue a report in 1908. When the Mills Commission neared the end of its 3-year mandate, Abraham G. Mills had received the Commission's findings. Impressive-looking fellow. Had received the Commission's findings so late that he could not finish his review. He dictated a letter to his stenographer in the afternoon of December 30th, 1907, in which he hurriedly stated his conclusions and anointed Doubleday as per his friend Spalding's wishes. Still, he commented on an unsettled question, and these words are printed in the Spalding Guide and were printed in all the baseball books at the time. Mills, I am also much interested in the statement made by Mr. Curry, president of the Pioneer Knickerbocker Club, and confirmed by Mr. Tassie of the famous Old Atlantic Club of Brooklyn, that a diagram showing the ball field laid out substantially as it is today was brought to the field one day by a Mr. Wadsworth. Mr. Curry says, the plan caused a great deal of talk, but finally we agreed to try it. Duncan F. Curry had made the statement to reporter Will Rankin in 1877, and Rankin had written about it to Mills 28 years later in 1905. With that report, the Commission's work was done, and its conclusions were published in Spalding's official guide for the 1908 season. No more was heard about Wadsworth until 1973, when Harold Peterson wrote a book about Alex Cartwright called The Man Who Invented Baseball. In it, he observed, Mr. Wadsworth, whose Christian name, occupation, residence, and pedigree remained secreted in Mills's bosom, was never heard of before or until long after that fateful afternoon, referring to the afternoon in 1877 when Curry spoke with Rankin. Mr. Peterson's book has many things to recommend it. Deep research is not one of them. Rankin wrote in the Sporting News in April 1908 that in 1886 he had forgotten the name of the person mentioned by Mr. Curry. So I went to see Mr. Thomas Tassie, and when I related to him that which Mr. Curry had told me, he said, "That is true, and the name of the man was Mr. Wadsworth, a very brilliant after-dinner talker, the Chauncey M. Depew of that day. He held a very important position in the Custom House." But Rankin told Mills that he had erred in recording Curry's name as Wadsworth. Upon reflection, nearly 30 years later, he was sure that Curry had said Cartwright. Now, how do you confuse Wadsworth and Cartwright? Can't go there. Furthermore, in 1905, he bullied the elderly Tassie into allowing that perhaps he too recalled Cartwright as the man with the diagram. Though Cartwright had left New York in 1849, years before Tassie became involved in baseball. In fact, Tassie was 14 years old when Cartwright left New York. In his final official function, Mills concluded his commission's report by writing, "It is possible that a connection more or less direct can be traced between the diagram drawn by Doubleday in 1839 and that presented to the Knickerbocker Club by Wadsworth in 1845 or thereabouts. And I wrote several days ago for certain data bearing on this point, but it has not yet come to hand. I have decided to delay no longer sending in the kind of paper your letter calls for," your meaning Spaulding and his secretary Sullivan, "promising to furnish you the indicated data when I obtain it, whenever it may be." He never was to learn anything further, although it has been supposed that he never made an attempt, but letters that he wrote to others searching for Wadsworth have turned up in my research for the Eden book in the period 2000-2005. Here are the last words of the Mills Commission report. "My deductions from the testimony submitted are, first, that baseball had its origin in the United States. Second, that the first scheme for playing it, according to the best evidence obtainable to date, was devised by Abner Doubleday at Cooperstown, New York in 1839. Yours very truly, A.G. Mills." The commission report, thus anointing a single inventor, was published on March 20th, 1908. A.G. Mills's imagined double-play tandem of Doubleday to Wadsworth did not pan out, but it was not long before writers would speculate about a similar handoff from Doubleday to Cartwright, with Wadsworth disappearing from the discussion after 1908. Wadsworth had left so cold a trail for the Mills Commission that his time on Earth could not be recalled accurately, nor could his current whereabouts, above ground or under it, be determined. 65 years later, not even Cartwright's biographer could pick up a clue, and conveyed in his sarcasm that Mills's Mr. Wadsworth was a fanciful concoction. By the 1980s, before the advent of digitized newspapers, this mysterious fellow Wadsworth had eluded me too, as well as the several genealogical experts I had enlisted to find him, actually paying real cash dollars for this and getting nothing. Even Wadsworth family histories and historians offered no clue. I knew Lou Wadsworth had played first base with the Gothams and Knickerbockers from the early 1850s to 1862, had parlayed his Whig sentiments into patronage posts, and was generally recorded in the press as L.F. Wadsworth. But where did he live after 1862 when he disappeared from the New York City directories? Slowly the details came into view. What cracked the ice was stumbling upon an obituary in the New York Times not findable with a search for Wadsworth. To this day, go to the New York Times site, search for Wadsworth, this does not come up. However, if you search for Wadsworth, W-A-C-S-V-O-R-T-H, you get this. The baseball in the Garden of Eden, for example, that I learned that he had applied unsuccessfully to West Point in 1845. And only in preparing this talk did I hit upon a document showing that he also registered for the Civil War draft in 1863, though he was not called to duty. This unimposing thing is the envelope of the letter he sent to West Point seeking admission. What is interesting apart from this circumstance is his signature, which is, well, up here. Find me another Louis F. Wadsworth signature, and maybe we'll get 3.2 million at all. The story of his later years has continued to fill in with additional, if not crucial, detail that had been unavailable to me for Eden. Let's proceed to do a racehorse run through the life of Louis Fenn Wadsworth, baseball's man of mystery. Make him sound like Austin Powers, right? After graduating with honors from Washington College in 1844 with a master's and applying to West Point unsuccessfully, he lived in Michigan, where his father had obtained a land grant from President Martin Van Buren in 1838. By 1848, Wadsworth had returned east to embark on a legal career on Wall Street. In those days, and perhaps ours in some states, a law degree was not a necessary predicate. One had only to pass the bar examination. In 1853, he was nominated by the 8th Ward Democratic Whigs, for whom he was the recording secretary, to the patronage position of school inspector. His daytime job was, as Thomas Tassie had declared, a naval office attorney in the Custom House, which was also a patronage position. So he knew how to play the political game. The workplace. That's where Louis Fenn Wadsworth showed up for work every day. The building still stands on Wall Street. It is a very pleasant place to wander around in and imagine Wadsworth being there too. A tempestuous character, Wadsworth commenced his ball-playing days with the Gothams, a venerable club that actually preceded the Knickerbockers. The Gothams began in 1837, the Knickerbockers in 1845, and at least 2 other clubs came in between. But the Knickerbockers were soon referred to as the Pioneer Club because they were the ones that survived. In the 1850s, there was a contest between members of the Gothams and the Knickerbockers, and some bad feeling as to who was really the first club and who should declare himself the pioneer. But when the Gothams disappeared, only to have a 50-year anniversary in 1882 or so, no, 1886 I guess it was, the Gothams were filed under other clubs and secondary clubs, and the Knickerbockers soon took claim of the origins report. Wadsworth quickly achieved prominence with the Gothams as the top first baseman of his time. Then, on April 1st, 1854, he switched his allegiance to the Knickerbockers, perhaps for emoluments, as recompense was euphemistically known then. His skilled play would increase the Knickerbocker chances of victory. It is these circumstances that incline me to believe that Wadsworth may thus be named baseball's first professional player. He may not have been given cash, he may have been given other considerations, as he had been throughout his political life and professional life. Within a few years, the practice of switching clubs in season, or revolving as it was known, became sufficiently pervasive for it to be banned in Doc Adams' new rules ratified at the 1857 convention. One of the veteran Knicks, in recalling some of the old players for the New York Sun in 1887, said, "I had almost forgotten the most important man on the team, and that is Lou Wadsworth. He was the life of the club. Part of his club suit consisted of a white shirt on the back of which was stamped a black devil. It makes me laugh still when I recall how he used to go after a ball. His hands were very large, and when he went for a ball, they looked like the tongs of an oyster rake. He got there all the same, and but few balls passed him. In his time with the Knicks, Wadsworth found his notions thwarted on at least 2 occasions, resigning each time before reconsidering and permitting the restoration of his name to the membership rolls. But things came to a head in 1856. So this little OCR, optical character recognition stumble certainly put a boulder in my path for a long time. From the Times of March 28, 1908, 8 days after the issuance of the Mills Commission report, 8 days, under the heading, "Once Rich Dies a Pauper," here is the obituary that no one in baseball ever saw. Adams and other progressives, Wadsworth backed a motion in a Knickerbocker meeting to permit non-Knickerbockers to join in with Knicks in their inter-squad games at the Elysian Fields of Hoboken if fewer than 18 Knicks were present. 9 men to the side had been the de facto standard, though not the legislated standard, for match play to this point. By match play, I mean a prearranged game between 2 distinct clubs, as opposed to intramural practices, which were overwhelmingly the preponderance of baseball played by the Knickerbockers and by other clubs. Wadsworth and his allies thought it more important to preserve the quality of play than to exclude those who were not club members. Duncan Curry counter-moved that if 14 Knickerbockers were available, the game should admit no outsiders and be played short-handed, at least by match standards. So a game of 7 men and 7 innings was in the offing when they met at the convention on January 22nd, 1857.